Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And we are so excited to have our Dr. Lenny back here, our great friend here from New York City. He's a chiropractor. He's amazing. We're going to talk a little biochemical, electrical systems and all this fun, medical stuff. But in the meantime, he's a chiropractor. He's a doctor. And he wants to say hello to you and introduce himself. How does that sound, Dr. Lenny?
Thank you. Okay. So, I'm Dr. Lenny Rosenblum. I'm located in the Union Square area at the corner of 18th and Broadway. And so the name of the office is Union Square Spinal Care. And it's one word for my website, which is unionsquarespinalcare.com. And but we also take telephone calls. We still have 20th century technology here. So it's 212-254-4586. And if you want to send an email, it's Dr. Lenny R, DRLENNYR @gmail.com.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. So you talk about our bodies being complicated, and even saying the words biochemical, electrical system is complicating. Let's talk about that to start.
Well, I just use the example of when you wake up in the morning, something about light triggers the hormonal system. And it makes your conscious mind move up to be aware of what's going on. You start to move your body. And as soon as your body starts to move, your heart starts to work. And if your heart starts to work and you start to move, you start to breathe more deeply. And that movement starts to stimulate your urinary tract and your digestive system. And suddenly you got to go to the restroom, but you're moving, and all these things are interdependent and work together. So I call it, actually, I added another word. I called it the biomechanical, chemical, electrical system, because everything integrates with each other.
Yeah.
So the hormonal system has to do with the nervous system, which has something to do with the musculoskeletal system, which has something to do with digestive system, which has something on and on.
Got it.
I love the example of how chiropractic was discovered back in 1895. There was a fellow who had fallen from a ladder and was deaf for 17 years afterwards.
What?
Named Harvey Leonard. And he was working finally as a janitor in an office because there were not many opportunities, I guess. And it was a slow day at the doctor's office, and he checked out his janitor and found out that when he fell somewhere in his mid-back, found something out of place over there and figured, what the heck, pushed on it. The guy's hearing came back. They thought there was a cure for deafness. So, it took over 100 years until we finally figured out that there are nerves in that part of the spine that affect blood flow in that part of the head that takes the message from your ears and brings it to your conscious mind.
Amazing.
So all these interrelationships are very complex, and we are, we still know more. We don't know more than about 25% of the brain. There's so much we don't know in terms of anatomy and everything. And the connections are just amazing in terms of, they're saying there's as many connections in the brain as there are stars in the heavens. And if you've seen the pictures from the Webb telescope, it's crazy numbers. So there is so much that goes on that we barely have an understanding or appreciation for. And until we map out everything, it might be several centuries. So how do we take care of people in the meantime? That's my question. And so I am looking to see how I can best communicate with the person in front of me, and what are the techniques that I have at my disposal, and how do I get feedback to let me know if I'm really moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
So, and we want to be able to do this without having to resort to labs and, imaging diagnostic tests, which are all very useful, but it gets expensive, takes a lot of time, and we want to make things as simple as possible and easy as possible. So patients come in, and my regular history, I go over, what they're feeling for sure. But, I also take a look at their posture, and their posture is very telling. So I'm going to show a picture of those people who are watching. You can't really see this if you're listening. But
oh my gosh, I got my seat over
here. Okay, she doesn't look very happy or comfortable in her body. She look at the middle picture, and you see how her head is moved back on the grid. Right?
Yeah.
She's definitely feeling that's the same day. If we look a month later in care, it looks like a completely different person. You see how her head is right over her shoulders, right over her hips, just in line. And she's really feeling so much better. So
Wow.
just seeing the image of how the posture changes as I work is very valuable.
Absolutely. Seeing
Sure.
is believing. Oh my goodness.
Now, I don't remember if I told you to check this out, but you're going to notice that if you take a deep breath when you're sitting down, there's movement down where you sit, even though your diaphragm is a good foot and a half above that, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So every breath that we take causes certain amount of movement in the spine and the whole body. And as you watch a person, if you see them swaying front to back, or if you see them swaying side to side, that's another indicator of what might be going on. Turns out swaying side to side is often associated with an injury to the ligaments in the lower back. And if we see them swaying front to back, it means there's something else going on in the hips, but it's not affecting the ligaments. It's a quicker fix. So these are another one of the little hints that I'm using to see how I can quickly help people get to feeling better in their lives. And you do the basic things. You feel this muscle tone. Sometimes there's like a pattern where it's like tight on one side and then you go down the spine, it's tight on the opposite side, try to counterbalance all these different forces. And these are also indications that I'm getting release.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm working, especially in the neck and the head, you can actually feel these muscles that can sometimes be very tight in the back of your head. And if you trace them down, they go to different parts of the back. Sometimes they go into the shoulders, sometimes they go behind the shoulders, into the ribs. All these are parts of the moving body that I take into account and helps me to find relief for people, or it makes it easier to work on that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. And then we're watching the breath. And when a person's lying down on the table, which is different than lying on your back, when lying down, the breath is pushing up into the spine because of all that action, the diaphragm. And you can watch a spine and you'll see sometimes it moves like a wave. And sometimes that wave is like 4 or 5 segments are just moving like, not like a wave, but up and down like one stuck piece. And that's another hint as to where there's tension in the spine that the body's not resolving. And sometimes all I have to do is put my hands on that spot and ask the patient, can you get more breath into here? And suddenly things start to shift. So there are so many different ways of approaching. So the 3 basic techniques that I really work with on a daily basis. The one that I use most is called this ABC, or Advanced Biostructural Correction, where I actually determine how one side of the body is working overtime to protect the other side. The side that's working overtime, when I do something that's a challenge, that's an irritant, that lets me know something has to happen, as I glide down the back of their head into these muscles of posture, top of the neck, you're actually going to find that the muscles get tighter on that side and they go further down on the side that's not working so hard. And that tells me something's amiss. I got to do something.
Yeah.
So over time, we've figured out the hierarchy of how the body wants to be released. And if you do that, just doing that one technique takes care of about like 85–90% of people's symptoms, which is wonderful. And I don't need any other equipment other than my eyes and my hands and doing that. There are other techniques that I also love. There's one called network spinal analysis, which is the one where people just lie down and I'm watching the breath. And I'm also feeling when a person's lying face down, when I move the foot back and forth or side to side, that's also an indication of where there's tension in the whole system, because these muscles of posture, which includes the ones in the leg, are very responsive. So there's a whole way of knowing what part of the spine to address just from that information. So that's another little piece in the puzzle that we've figured out how to help. And then there's another group of techniques that I love to use called sacro-occipital technique.
Ooh.
This is an old one. It actually got started in the late 1950s. And I actually had the honor of taking class with the founder, Dr. Bertrand. And that's the one where we use these wedge-shaped blocks under the hips in specific angles, and just the movement of the spine with the breath and the weight of the body also releases all kinds of tensions in the whole system. And that one, we're just using, we use muscle testing for that one.
Okay.
Muscle testing is fantastic, which leads me a whole other area of work. But I don't know how to explain this without any visuals, but I'll have a person hold their arm out and I'll push down and just determine what's their baseline of strength. And if you touch something which is irritable, the mind is distracted from the desire to hold this muscle in place and it becomes weaker.
Okay.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, if I demonstrate this with patients in my office and I take a nickel rechargeable battery and I hold it against their body and I check their arm strength and suddenly it becomes weaker. He's not stupid. And something that's not good for it, because nickel is a toxic metal and don't use it in dental appliances anymore, it starts to have effect. And that's a little bit interesting because now I have another diagnostic tool that is something that I do is an irritant or provocation. We can actually get feedback immediately just by that little muscle test. So I have a kit in my office of 75 most common allergy prone foods. And in 10 or 15 minutes, I can tell a person you should avoid this and this is okay. And we've done some work and now you can go ahead and have this again. And it's very accurate. I used to send out for blood tests where they would, check the white blood cell reaction in different foods. And this was like 95% correlating with the lab test, except done right here. So that's another valuable little tool in our kit. So let's see. I talked about a little bit of muscle testing. Range of motion. That's another one that I love to use.
I love it. Go ahead. Range of motion.
Motion. So range of motion talks about if you turn your head one side to the other, have the same number of degrees, can you go back and forth, all these things are nice. But what I'm doing when a person's lying on their back and I'll sit behind them, so I'm sitting at the head of the table and I'll hold their head in my hands and I'll ask them, let your head go passively lifted, and I'll start to bring their head up, and it should move up and down in 4 distinct steps because the cervical vertebrae pair up in 4 pairs as they go up and down, because the 7 cervical vertebrae plus the first one in relationship to the base of your skull, the occiput. So this motion should move free. And if you feel restriction, or when you take it to different positions, angles side to side, it can tell you exactly where in that spine something is out of alignment. And then when I feel it directly, instead of trying to feel every vertebra, I know exactly where to go. Now, not only do I have the right place because the patient feels it, and as I move their head, it feels stuck, but when it comes time to work on them, I know the exact address of where that vertebra wants to be held in order to correct it.
Interesting.
So it takes a lot of the fear of having your neck moved around by another person.
Sure does. Wow. Interesting.
So we have lots of tools that we have in our pockets that don't require high-tech things. I have a friend of mine who's a medical doctor who works up here in the Bronx, but volunteers to work in Africa, out in bush. And he talks about having to practice 1970s medicine, meaning they don't have computers, they don't have any imaging, they have to do everything the old-fashioned way. And he loves what I'm doing because he can use these things when he goes out to work there. So it can be applied to many different fields of endeavor. So I talked about that. And last week, told you I was going to talk more about allergy work.
Yes.
Right. So yes, I could figure out what can cause what foods can be an irritant to a person, but does that really help them get rid of the allergy? Because it's nice to have information. It's better to get rid of the allergy. And there's all kinds of means of addressing allergy. And what we have, let me see, I think I have it. I wrote down something because I actually prepared for this. Yeah. I mean, this was discovered by this Dr. Devi Namboodrapad. She has like way too many initials after her name because not only is she a chiropractor, she's a medical doctor and she's a licensed acupuncturist. So
Okay.
she's taken all these different technologies and well, she released this in 1983, but it still gets updated. And it's called NAET, or Nambuja Allergy Elimination Technique.
Okay.
And what she has gone into, and I like to use I'm going to use this analogy because it'll help explain. Ever hear of a couple decide to get divorced because somebody burnt the toast? It wasn't the toast. It was all the things leading up to that.
Yeah.
So somebody might have an allergy to, say, strawberries or cats, and you can treat that, but it never really goes away.
Got it.
There are things that led up to that point. And what her technique talks about is harmonizing all the different levels of chemistry in the body.
Okay.
So I love, so when I talk about that, we always start with treating. We don't even test. We just treat right off resistance to eggs and milk. And not that the person has any problem with eggs or milk, but the proteins in eggs and milk mimic our own body. So we're reharmonizing our body's internal workings, our internal relationships, and going through those proteins. We're going through minerals, are going through the vitamins, we're going through certain hormones and the digestive juices and certain things that are in the air and all these things. There's 18 subgroups that go into this if you need to do all 18, because I have a short version which only takes like 6 visits. But all 18 groups, when you assign those to be more relaxed, again, 85% of allergies are gone. True. And then we have the ability to test other things and store them. But what's really exciting development that's happened over the years is there's a technology. Oh boy, here's another technology. It's called muscle testing. Somebody in Germany back in the 1950s decided to measure how electricity is conducted on the skin over acupuncture points.
Oh.
And here's his story. He brought this to the attention of his colleagues at a big conference. He did a test on one of the volunteers, went to the point on the pinky that correlates to the heart meridian, said, boy, you've got some problems with your heart. The guy said, oh yeah, I do. Thanks. Oh, okay. Well, they went to lunch. They came back from lunch. He brought the same volunteer up to test him again, and suddenly the readings were normal.
Wow.
During lunch, he said, oh, one of my colleagues gave me some medicine to take for my heart. He said, did you take it? He said, no, it's in my pocket. So remember I talked about using the nickel battery that would make a strong arm go weak?
Yep.
This is the opposite. This made an abnormal reading become normal. And this opened up a whole technology that we call EAV, or electroacupuncture, after Vol, because it was Dr. Vol who discovered this.
Got it.
Well, then the Brits back in the 1960s came along with this whole other thing of, well, if you're not actually ingesting this thing, there must be some kind of signal that the body can read. And they actually have something called radionics. Okay, it sounds very high tech, but they're actually able to get the signal, the electromagnetic signal of these things, and store them on the hard disk of my computer now. Yeah. So now I can hook somebody up with little clips on the acupuncture point that has to do with allergy, flip a switch, the machine will send out a provoking signal and record everything that's a positive test.
Wow.
So now, instead of spending months with people to do this allergy work, I can do it in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Very nice.
Pretty amazing.
And I have like over 90% success with seasonal allergy.
Yeah.
Food allergies depends on if they were born with that allergy, in which case I can't change their DNA.
Yeah.
But again, people that have not been able to eat certain things. I love this one story. So,
I apologize, but we're out of time. It's 2:30. I know. Yeah, we started so late today. I'm so sorry. I would stay on longer if I didn't have another show.
All right. Well, we got a lot, and hopefully it'll do some good.
Remember that for next time. Let's start with that, okay?
Okay.
Dr. Lenny, tell us how we can reach out to you.
Call me at 212-254-4586, or online, go to Dr. Lenny R, DRLENNYR @gmail.com, or my website, unionsquarespinalcare.com. There's a link
Perfect.
there on the top of the page. You can make an appointment.
Good. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a fantastic day. Thank you again. Thank you for my seat cushion. It's working well.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.